Hello, my name is Magnus Brandfors. I am a investment advisor, independent with Commonwealth Financial at Stellicum Investments, and been an advisor since 1992. Wanted to discuss today about an incredibly important subject for senior citizens, retiree investors, and that is elder fraud. It's a much bigger problem than most people realize. It's underreported for one, and seniors are very vulnerable to being defrauded. But with good planning, the risks can be greatly reduced or eliminated. So in my presentation today, as an overview, we're going to talk about what and who are the threats, what the red flags are, and the unique characteristics of elder fraud, and finally, what steps should you take as a power of attorney, a child, grandchild of a person susceptible to fraud. This obviously applies as well to senior citizens watching this as they begin to realize that perhaps they need a little bit of help in their financial matters. So, starting with the threats, a common threat, of course, is a stranger. This can oftentimes be a person that comes up to you on the street and tries to work a scam on you, or it can be, somebody on the phone or through the mail. Robocalls. Some of these robocalls are obvious when they hit people, and some of them are pretty cleverly disguised. So the big threat in the country, you see the Department of Justice working on trying to eliminate this threat, but it is a real threat, and many times the robocalls are from sources outside of this country where it's very difficult to prosecute the crime and certainly almost impossible to recover money. Email and phishing scams, things related to the computer. Again, they can also be particularly clever, and again, much of that is done overseas, making it difficult or impossible to recover funds if they are stolen. Mailbox, and this could be just junk mail. It's a political mail. It's amazing how many lobby groups, political groups, are aggressively going after senior citizens, threatening them with things such as taking away people's Social Security benefits or Medicare or Medicaid, alarming senior citizens through deceptive mail practices. There are investment scams, and these can come from places as near and dear as the church you belong to. So investment scams from social groups, real estate investments, brokerage firms, even within my industry, but our industry in financial advice is very heavily regulated. Many of the investment scams go outside of the protection of the regulatory bodies that supervise banks, brokerage firms, independent financial institutions. Sadly, one of the greatest threats to in elder fraud is from a family member. It can be sadly, there's that connection there. So what are the list of red flags? Who are the most vulnerable, etc. The most vulnerable is the single person. In a married couple, at least one person can be there for the other. Another red flag is a person that has vices such as drugs, alcohol, or gambling. They can be more easily duped and taken advantage of. People that live alone. Somebody that has no nearby relatives. In-home care. All of a sudden there are new friends showing up on the horizon for a person. Or potentially a new love interest. Strange behavior. A person that is, acting deceptively might be under duress of fraud. And or you're visiting your parents or a friend and you notice that there are valuables missing in the home, or discussions about having lent things out or equipment or money or such. So what are some of the characteristics of elder fraud? A problem with elder fraud is that once funds are lost, it may be almost impossible to recover the money. The burden of proof in fraud cases is very high. It can be very hard to criminally prosecute somebody. Diminished capacity, trying to prove that somebody was swindled because they had diminished capacity, that has a very high threshold. So a person that was ripped off by a family member or a stranger nearby, simply duped because they're just not cognitively there anymore. In a legal matter like that, it can be hard to establish proof that the person didn't know what they were doing when they lent $30,000 to a niece or a nephew, and so victims, they're often too embarrassed to admit that they've been taken. That's a characteristic of elder fraud. Punishment for the crime can be so low that it encourages crime. There are crime rings where they travel across the country and dupe the elderly in neighborhoods or in bank parking lots and things like that. And the bail that is set when somebody is caught is oftentimes so low that it's easily for the crime syndicate to skip bail and simply move on to the next town. Potential victims may be reluctant for assistance. They want to be left alone. They don't like anybody prying into their business. So there is nobody there to safeguard them. And elder assistance can be burdensome, expensive. So a lot of times the victims are almost defenseless. So what are the steps that should be taken to mitigate, reduce, or try to eliminate the potential for elder fraud? And there's a number of things that can be done. So let's discuss the ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure. One of the best steps that can be taken to avoid elder fraud is for a power of attorney, child, grandson, granddaughter, somebody taking care of an elderly person and their investments in banking, is to get online access. Get access to the banking accounts, brokerage accounts, insurance accounts, so that you can occasionally check and see what the financial activity going on in the accounts are. Also credit cards. You can, by setting up some sort of a monitoring system, a person can very quickly spot some sort of an issue or fraud going on. Estate planning. Before a client gets too old, you want to do a variety of different estate planning things. For example, power of attorney, updated will, living trust. And then as an executor of that estate, be very familiar with the documents that said person has set up. There should be a mention of, for example, perhaps in the will or living trust, that any future changes made to avoid the risk that somebody gets a will or trust drastically redone, that if any dramatic changes to a will or a trust are made, that the new documents need to have a very detailed written explanation to explain why dramatic changes were done. And perhaps also to have a significant number of witnesses to attest to that fact. Financial institutions now allow a person to list a trusted contact on their investment or banking accounts. The benefit of this is, for me as a financial advisor, unless there is a listed contact, for me to contact, I am not allowed to discuss the financial matters of a client with another relative, let alone a stranger, when I start to suspect that there is fraud. So basically, financial advisors, bankers, etc., had their hands tied due to confidentiality. So having a listed, trusted contact allows your relatives or parents, advisors, to contact you or the authorities should they suspect something is going on. Be suspicious. Trust your gut instinct. When you think something is going on, there probably is. And it's just a natural, there is something about trusting your gut when it comes to these cases. Beware of troubled and needy relatives. And this is an important part of monitoring. If there is a wealthy, at-risk victim, people know that that person has money. And so the monitoring of the situation is really important, especially if there is a real needy person that is around the potential victim. Cognitive decline. If there is cognitive decline that renders a person unable to legally enter into a binding contract, it may make sense to have that person deemed legally incompetent so that they cannot be, legally defrauded. Limit ease of access. For example, bank accounts with extremely large sums of money. Maybe it's not a good idea to have a bank checking book or a debit card linked to that account just laying around. Keep the larger sums of money in accounts like that with some limited access. Consolidate financial relationships. It's common for a senior citizen of substantial means, in some cases, to have, 4, 5, 6 banks and 5 or 6 different investment institutions and brokerage firms and insurance companies. There really shouldn't be more than 2 banks or 2 financial investment institutions in that relationship. So the person should be working with the most competent, reliable, good relationship people that they've established over the years. In most cases, for me, my clients have over years consolidated their investment portfolios to me, and then I've worked with the bank. And in this way, I know what's going on in this person's financial situation, and it's easier for me to help assist the family in making sure that there's no potential for fraud. If you are the power of attorney, or the relative or friend in charge of a person, participate in occasional meetings with that person, or in a joint visit with that person's bankers or advisors. It opens up the lines of communication. Again, review banks, credit card statements, investment accounts on a reasonably regular basis to make sure that no large sums of money are moving around in places that seem suspicious. The mailbox. One of the big sources of preying upon senior citizen is junk mail. Do what you can to discontinue a person from getting all sorts of junk mail. Senior citizens, they shouldn't have their Social Security card in their wallet. The only thing that should be in a person's wallet are things that are truly necessary. The internet is a big source of elder abuse and fraud, and the risk of email and internet being hijacked is high. A person should regularly change their passwords on their internet accounts. Robocalls, email, fraud, phishing. It's important to discuss with your parents or a senior about being very careful what they disclose over the telephone with somebody that they don't know. Communicate with siblings. If you are the power of attorney or if you have a family, working on this together it is a good idea. For people in the home, doing a little bit of a background check. In-home help, or people that are often around the homes or going to assist an elderly person, get some references and do at least a reasonable background check. You also may consider an alarm system or video monitoring of the residents. You can also help a senior citizen with their telephone so that a person knows what phone calls are coming in and what may be spam or robocalls. And most phones these days have the ability for a person to look at the history of incoming calls into a landline or a cell phone. So if you're assisting your parents, as you're acting as the power of attorney for an aging, declining relative, take a look and see what kind of phone calls are coming in and from who, and note anything that might be suspicious there. By taking the steps that I just mentioned there, you've got the ability of reducing the potential for fraud. Sadly, in the United States, the estimate is that about 3 to 5% of senior citizens become victims of fraud. In 2 or 3 cases, the damages start getting into the tens of thousands. I have personally seen cases throughout my career and now take a very active role in making sure that they do not affect my clients. I hope this is helpful. This is an important subject. If you have any questions, feel free and contact me. Thank you again for watching.